former FBI Director James Comey is now the first senior government official to face charges in one of President Trump's biggest grievances, the 2016 Russia investigation. Comey is charged with giving a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding relating to the testimony he gave before the Senate Judiciary Committee 5 years ago. This indictment comes just days after the president publicly demanded it, and shortly after the person the president had picked to be the U.S. attorney in this office quit. And the new U.S. attorney, 3 days into that job, did what the president had wanted to happen only 5 days before the statute of limitations was set to run out.
Señores, oficialmente Donald Trump logró que se presente una acusación formal en contra de nada más y nada menos que su ex director del FBI. Hablamos de James Comey. Así es, señores, un ex jefe del FBI y, ojo, que trabajó con Trump en su primer mandato. Ahora está enfrentando cargos criminales. Y todo esto bajo la sombra directa del trumpismo. Ustedes recordarán que Trump recientemente, y lo hablamos hace unos días, había despedido al fiscal federal de Virginia, Eric Seibert, un fiscal republicano que dejó claro que no existían pruebas suficientes ni para acusar a James Comey ni para acusar a Letitia James. Pues bueno, ¿qué hizo Trump? Lo sacó y colocó en su lugar a Lindsay Halligan, su ex abogada personal, la cual, por cierto, jamás ha llevado un caso en un tribunal. Veamos de qué se trata.
There's more breaking news tonight. The U.S. attorney under heavy pressure from President Trump to charge a New York State official the president considers a political enemy is stepping down. Earlier today, the president said he wanted to get rid of Eric Seibert, head of the Eastern District of Virginia. That's Seibert there. The president has been demanding that he charge New York Attorney General Letitia James with mortgage fraud. Seibert's office does not have enough evidence, they say, to bring an indictment. The president is angry with Seibert because or with Letitia James because she won a business fraud case against him and his company.
Pues bueno, Donald Trump no se conformó con eso. También presionó a su fiscal general Pam Bondi para ir tras Adam Schiff y tras Letitia James. Pero bueno, como todavía esto es un proceso, y seguramente no van a tardar en intentar acusarlos, el primero de la lista fue James Comey, porque el plazo de prescripción estaba a punto de cumplirse este mismo 30 de septiembre. Así que pues bueno, sacaron todas las cartas y lo apresuraron. El gran jurado aceptó 2 de los 3 cargos y rechazó uno. Y recordemos, amigos, en un gran jurado, ni el acusado ni un juez están presentes. O sea, solo escucha la fiscalía. O sea, en otras palabras, basta con que el fiscal plantee su versión para conseguir una acusación. Otra cosa es el juicio, donde la carga de la prueba es mucho mayor. Pero bueno, veamos esta noticia.
Tonight, the president is celebrating, writing in all caps on Truth Social, quote, "Justice in America. One of the worst human beings this country has ever exposed to is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation." The president ended his post with "Make Great Again." This comes as I'm told by sources tonight that James Comey is expected to surrender tomorrow morning. We'll be watching, obviously, that appearance very closely. But the former director of the FBI has already made quite clear tonight that he's prepared to fight these charges.
Ok, amigos, este caso cayó en manos de un juez nombrado por Biden. Ojo. Y desde el propio Departamento de Justicia ya han llegado críticas demoledoras. Es más, varios fiscales están calificando todo esto como uno de los peores abusos de poder en la historia moderna del Departamento de Justicia. Y por supuesto, pues Trump lo celebró, lanzando un comunicado en el cual calificó a James Comey como uno de los peores seres humanos en Estados Unidos. Pero bueno, es ese tipo de declaraciones, ¿no?, que son dinamita, que se pueden luego utilizar como evidencia de que este es un caso político, no un caso judicial. James Comey no tardó en responder con un video desafiante donde él afirma que está roto de corazón por ver cómo es que se ha corrompido el Departamento de Justicia, pero afirmando que es inocente y está listo para ir a juicio. Veamos ese momento.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Bueno, no podía faltar la fiscal Pam Bondi diciendo que nadie está por encima de la ley. Pero cuando uno mira la acusación de cerca, apenas son 2 páginas, sin mayores detalles y firmadas. Y claro, por esta chica Lindsay Halligan. Los cargos son 2. Declaraciones falsas al Congreso y obstrucción de un procedimiento legislativo. Según esta acusación, James Comey mintió en el año 2020 al decir que no autorizó a Andy Cabby a filtrar información a la prensa. Pero señores, lo que nos muestran los hechos es que quien tomó esa decisión fue esa persona y que Comey solo se enteró después. Y aquí es clave ver cómo, por ejemplo, Ted Cruz lo interrogó en aquella audiencia que seguramente ustedes ni se recordarán, pero se las voy a mostrar, mezclando preguntas compuestas para tratar de hacerlo pisar el palito, ¿no? Como dicen. Tratar de atraparlo en una mentira. Bueno, voy a mostrarles ese momento para que lo vean con sus propios ojos.
Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it.
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak.
I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Y amigos, aquí está lo interesante porque todo indica que James Comey nunca mintió bajo juramento. Es más, el propio informe por parte del inspector general confirma que quien autorizó esto fue Cabby, el que autorizó las filtraciones, que James Comey no dio la orden. Y aún así, Donald Trump presiona para forzar esta acusación. Ahora, era de esperarse, ¿no?, que ante semejante situación ya comenzaran los rechazos masivos. Los primeros vinieron por parte de los demócratas. Escuchemos al senador Richard Blumenthal.
It is a really dark, sad, scary day for America, and that post that you just showed is truly petrifying. The President of the United States ordered criminal charges against an individual who happens to be a political adversary and a critic of him. And let's be clear about what's happening here. The president is singling out someone he just doesn't like. And that post that you just showed could create a defense, maybe even grounds for dismissal. I spent most of my life in law enforcement. I was the U.S. attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years. We were very careful about what we said on charges because they could be used against us in a criminal trial. And this case is replete with Donald Trump telling the Attorney General to act fast, and creating possible defenses here. But let's look at the broader picture. I always felt as a prosecutor, the most consequential decisions I made were whether to charge someone. People simply don't fully recover from criminal charges, even if they are acquitted, because half the world believes that they were acquitted on some kind of technicality. Well, Donald Trump is populating the Department of Justice with lawyers who will do his bidding, pervert the rule of law, and single out people that they may not like, who may have offended them, or maybe adversaries politically, whether it's a small business person or a public official. Today it's Comey, tomorrow it could be you.
Luego tenemos a la congresista Jasmine Crockett.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I want the American people to know that when you stand up to a bully, you win. Do not back down. Do not bend. You allow them to go and wage their threats. If everybody starts to bend, for sure what is left of our democracy will be gone. And unfortunately, that is exactly what he wants. And even more sadly, is that many of his followers agree with this. And I am thinking to myself, how is it that you can call yourself American or patriotic when you literally don't understand who we are as Americans, when you literally are okay with throwing out the Constitution, when you're okay with someone just deciding, you know what, this is the end result that I'm seeking. And so just figure out how to get there versus doing what you are supposed to do. And I am so appalled at those that took an oath, at those that actually went to law school. Many of us ended up with law school debt. And then we have to take not only the bar exam, but we have an ethics exam that we have to take, because there is supposed to be some level of ethics in what we do when we go into a courtroom. Now you have people that literally either they just don't know the law or they just don't care. But the idea that you would go after someone, and listen, even as Democrats, we had our fair share of issues with James Comey, okay? But that's not a reason to prosecute someone. And so here's the deal. If he decides that he wants to continue down this path, I think that they're going to continue to lose. And I don't see the former FBI director saying that he is going to just go ahead and say enter into a plea deal, or he's just going to take this line down. I think that this is someone who absolutely will fight this to the end.
Increíble, señores, hasta en Fox News hubo voces reconociendo que este movimiento fue orquestado por Trump. Miremos este fragmento.
Let's not mince words here. I say this as a former Justice Department reporter. This was completely and totally orchestrated by President Trump. He says he's leaving it to justice, but, you know, he very much out in the open. Remember, he fired his own appointee as U.S. attorney in that part of Virginia because he didn't think there was enough evidence to bring this case. Brought in White House aide, his former defense lawyer, whose job was to get this done, and apparently that has worked. I think we've become inured to this, but in previous administrations, any hint of contact within a criminal case would be a scandal on its own. And so President Trump, by the way he pulled the strings, has gotten his way with this initial indictment.
La raíz del odio de Trump hacia James Comey viene de algo, señores, que todos recordamos, y es cuando Comey dijo que Putin parecía tener influencia sobre Trump. Eso es lo que jamás se lo perdonó. Aquí está esa declaración que tanto lo enfureció.
Never felt that way about an American president. And I don't know whether the Russians have something over President Trump, but it's difficult to explain his conduct, his statements in any other way, especially his refusal to criticize Vladimir Putin, even in public. And so it raises a significant question, and obviously the question is only deepened by disclosure, if it's true, of significant indebtedness.
Y para entender un poco más, recordemos lo que Comey declaró en el año 2017 bajo juramento. Les muestro ese pequeño extracto.
There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose. They did it with sophistication. They did it with overwhelming technical efforts. And it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. It is a high confidence judgment of the entire intelligence community. And the members of this committee have seen the intelligence. It's not a close call. That happened. That's about as unfake as you can possibly get, and is very, very serious, which is why it's so refreshing to see a bipartisan focus on that, because this is about America, not about any particular party.
So that was a hostile act by the Russian government against this country.
Yes, sir.
In that time frame, there were more than the DNC and the DCCC that were targets.
Correct. There was a massive effort to target government and non-governmental, near-governmental agencies like nonprofits.
What would be the estimate of how many entities out there the Russians specifically targeted in that time frame?
It's hundreds, I suppose it could be more than 1,000, but it's at least hundreds.
Incluso, luego en el año 2018, James Comey volvió a criticar con fuerza a los republicanos de la Cámara tras otro interrogatorio. Escuchemos.
President matter, the rule of law matters, and the truth matters. Where are those Republicans today? At some point, someone has to stand up and in the face of fear of Fox News, fear of their base, fear of mean tweets, stand up for the values of this country and not slink away into retirement, but stand up and speak the truth. I find it frustrating to be here answering questions about things that are far less important than the values that this country is built upon.
Pues bueno, señores, todo esto nos demuestra que la base del caso es algo extremadamente débil. Yo creo que lo más probable se caiga en los tribunales. Pero bueno, Trump ya consiguió lo que quería. Un show político. Titulares mediáticos, enviar el mensaje de que va a perseguir a cualquiera que se lo ponga, etc. Y no hay que olvidarnos quién es esta fiscal que lleva el caso, que es la misma Lindsey Graham. La vimos defendiendo a Trump durante el caso del escándalo de Mar-a-Lago. Y bueno, para que puedan refrescarse un poco la memoria, aquí tienen ese momento.
Thanks for your service today. Hey, how are you? Oh, all right, make a path, please. Coming through. Have a great day here. It really is, you know. Very good.
Así que, señores, ¿qué es lo que podemos esperar de todo esto? Lo más seguro es que el caso se derrumbe en los tribunales porque las pruebas no sostienen estas acusaciones, pero ya Trump nos dejó claro que él va a utilizar al Departamento de Justicia como su martillo en contra de sus enemigos políticos. Pues bueno, yo pienso que este abuso se le puede volver en contra porque el Departamento de Justicia está cada vez más dividido. O sea que no me sorprendería que de repente veamos, yo no sé, renuncias masivas, protestas, etc. Y bueno, señores, hablando de renuncias masivas, despidos masivos. La Casa Blanca está utilizando el miedo como esta herramienta de negociación. Ahora están amenazando con despidos masivos si es que el Congreso de los Estados Unidos no aprueba el proyecto de ley de gastos. Ojo, no estamos hablando solo de este cierre parcial del gobierno, ¿no? Estamos hablando de gente perdiendo su trabajo de manera definitiva. Estamos a pocos días de que se venza este plazo para aprobar el presupuesto y bueno, en lugar de buscar un consenso, ¿no? El equipo del trumpismo ha decidido subir las apuestas con un memorando que prácticamente te dice, si no nos aprueban el dinero que queremos, van a correr cabezas. Y claro, esto ha provocado una reacción durísima en el Congreso, especialmente por el lado de los demócratas. Veamos de qué se trata.
We are back with Shutdown Watch. It is now just 5 days until the federal government runs out of money. And now the White House is threatening mass firings in the federal government on top of furloughs should a shutdown occur. So far, Democrats have refused to agree to a deal if it doesn't extend subsidies to help people buy insurance. But now, with President Trump's team upping the ante, could it force their hands? Joining us now is MSNBC congressional reporter Michael Schnell. So, Michael, how are Democrats responding to this new threat?
Yeah, Anna, as you can imagine, they are having a fierce reaction to this new memo from the Office of Management and Budget that came through overnight, frustrated by this development and essentially saying they see it as a threat. I want to read to you a little bit of what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said. I think it crystallizes a lot of the Democratic argument in this situation. He essentially called the current situation a threat, and he's also arguing that what OMB is threatening to do, these mass firings, isn't exactly new because of what happened earlier this year with the Department of Government Efficiency, of course, what we knew as DOGE. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of what Chuck Schumer said, saying, quote, "This is an attempt at intimidation. Donald Trump has been firing federal workers since day one, not to govern, but to scare. This is nothing new and has nothing to do with funding the government." So, Anna, this is just the latest development in this ongoing shutdown showdown that's been going on for a few days now, is going to be dragging on until next week's deadline. At the crux of it, the situation we have here is that Democrats are demanding that Republicans agree to a slew of health care changes in order to get their support for a funding bill. They also want language in that funding bill to ensure that Republicans spend the money as appropriated. Here's a little bit of Chuck Schumer last night, essentially explaining what the Democratic argument is in this current situation.
One, we've seen how bad, and the American people have seen how bad Trump's policies are. And second, they have shown that they're willing to go around the law if we don't stop them from that. Third, we Democrats are united now. We are totally united in saying we want to sit down, we want to negotiate. We're not going to get everything we want. They're not going to get everything they want. But to help deal with the chaos in healthcare caused by this big, so-called beautiful bill.
So, Anna, very clear right there. Chuck Schumer standing his ground, showing no indication of budging as that shutdown deadline creeps up on us just 5 days away from September 30th of next week.
All right, that's next Tuesday, Michael Schnell. Thank you. And my next guest is here to help us make sense of why we keep ending up in this same situation over and over again. Julian Zelizer joins us. He's a professor of history and public affairs at Princeton University. Julian, this wasn't always the way Congress operated. These shutdowns that seem to be just kind of a regular occurrence now weren't back then. What's changed?
Yeah, a key turning point was the mid-90s, 1995 and 96, when Speaker Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House, a Republican, engaged in a standoff with President Clinton. And we had two government shutdowns, lengthy ones, in succession. And it backfired on Republicans. But since then, shutdowns have become a normal part of the back and forth in budget politics. And that's how we ended up here today.
There have been 20 funding gaps since Congress changed the way the budget process works in 1976. Should there be a 21st next week? What does history tell us about who's going to get the blame?
It's hard to tell. It was 1974 that we had the change in the process. Often Congress can get the blame. I mean, presidents do have the bully pulpit. They have the ability to cast this as an issue caused by the Congress, and legislators, even a Senator Schumer, the majority or minority leaders, don't have that same kind of capacity. One thing, they become less of a crisis point in recent years, which is also interesting. The public, they happen more frequently, and the public takes less notice. So it's hard to predict, but we're seeing how far President Trump will go, and I think Democrats are wary of that.
It seems no one wins in a shutdown. Break down, though, for our viewers, just how damaging a shutdown is, not just for Americans, but the whole world.
That's the real story. And frankly, that's how this has to be debated. This will affect the basic government services that people have, and that can range from the ability to obtain a visa to the ability to go to a national park. It will depend on the parameters of what's closed and what's shut down. But those services are frozen and can have huge effects. Someone who needs medical treatment can't come. And if the firing happens, that's a whole other level of pain. Government services are intertwined in how our society works. And it's hard to get workers back after they're removed. So this will have huge consequences.
Julian, you write in your latest piece for Foreign Policy, quote, as Democrats weigh their next moves to rein in this presidency and grow more willing to use hardball tactics that many party leaders have traditionally resisted, they must remain mindful of the damage they could inflict on the very institutions that their party values most, namely a healthy, functional, and robust federal government. I think a lot of Americans would argue we are long gone past that. Is this moment, this potential shutdown, different?
Well, look, we can't give up on the importance of governing. And I think you can have two thoughts at once. There can be a strong logic to fighting right now for Democrats to do this, to insist on accountability, to insist on the constitutional processes of government.
Donald Trump y su equipo están utilizando a los trabajadores federales como una ficha de negociación prácticamente. O sea, como si fueran desechables. Y esto, señores, es gravísimo. En una democracia el presupuesto es algo que debería teóricamente debatirse, ¿no? Con propuestas. con argumentos, con negociación, no con ultimátums. Además, pensemos tan solo en el impacto real detrás de todo esto. No estamos hablando solo de burócratas en oficinas. Estamos hablando de gente que mantiene servicios básicos funcionando. Si estas personas son despedidas, no solo sufren ellos y sus familias, sino también los ciudadanos que dependen de servicios como lo es atención médica, permisos, seguridad, etc. Ahora, seguramente no faltará quien me diga que los demócratas también se están poniendo duros y condicionan su apoyo, y sí. Pero amigos, eso es parte de una negociación política normal, que es exigir cambios, condiciones, lenguaje en la ley. Lo que está mal aquí es utilizar la amenaza laboral como un arma. Esa es la diferencia entre negociar y extorsionar. Lo más absurdo es que Donald Trump lo pinta como una estrategia de presión, cuando en realidad esto se puede volver en su contra. Es más, la historia ya nos los ha demostrado. Cada vez que un presidente juega con el cierre de gobierno, al final el costo político suele caer sobre la Casa Blanca. ¿Por qué? Porque la gente no olvida quién es el que encendió esa mecha. Pero bueno, señores, ¿qué opinan ustedes sobre todo esto? ¿Creen que esta táctica de amenazas podrá funcionarle a Trump? ¿O será que terminará explotándole en la cara? Los leo en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.